Debbie Forward was born in St. John's, Newfoundland. She is the daughter of Reginald Powell and Lorna Clowder. Debbie was just a year old when her father sadly passed away. Her mother Lorna taught Debbie that anything is possible. There's always a way forward. A single mother in the 1950s, Lorna raised two successful daughters,
Donna and Debbie, and they're both nurses, which I'm so proud of. And it comes in handy too, I can tell you.
Debbie graduated from Munn School of Nursing in 1980 and began working in the ER at the Grace General Hospital.
When we graduated, we both worked at the Grace. So she worked at the Grace in the OPD and I worked up on sick surgery.
She loved the outpatients work, the dramatic part of that. She loved that.
We both competed on a position in the nursing school, in the School of Nursing at the Grace Hospital. Unfortunately, I wasn't successful, but Debbie was. And that's when she went, changed from working on the nursing units to being a nursing instructor.
In 1985, she began teaching at the Grace Hospital School of Nursing and went on to teach at the Center for Nursing Studies in 1996.
Everything she started to do, she made it. She was a wonderful teacher also, nurses teacher.
Her union involvement started in the early 1980s when she was elected shop steward on her unit. In 1988, she joined our board as a St. John's regional representative.
We both started on the Nurses Union board at the same time, and at that time we were St. John's regional representatives. She was a young mother like myself, had two young children.
They were her pride and joy, and nothing was too much for her to do for either one of them.
I don't know, her children are her life.
She was an exceptional mother.
She loves her family, but her other love is the union.
Debbie became president in 1996.
I can remember when she said, "Mom, I'm going to run for the nurses union." And she said, "What do you think?" And I said, "My dear, you can do it. Nothing is impossible. You can do anything. You work for it and you can do it."
Our president had stepped down. The election was thrown open to any board member. You had to be a board member in order to run. So I put my name forward. I was nominated as well as Debbie. And the board voted and chose Debbie as the president.
Oh, I can remember it. I guarantee you I can remember. It was a wonderful day when she got elected. She was so excited. And of course, I was even more excited.
I do remember all the campaigning she did, which was a lot of work for her.
I remember that we were getting a new van and that we were getting a new cell phone. She was getting like this big bag cell phone that she was going to get to have, and that was pretty exciting and brand new.
It didn't take her very long to get into the role and to shine. She just took on the role. It was made for her.
My first memories of Debbie are back in the late 1990s. And the time leading up to the 99 strike and all the workload issues, staffing issues, safety issues at work and everything, it was just boiling over, which culminated, of course, in our 99 strike.
This isn't just for us. It's for our patients. It's for the future of healthcare in this province.
It was a turbulent time.
Events were out of hand in our union. We had so many casual nurses. We had so much dissatisfaction. Our pay was not adequate. Yet we had a government that wanted to pattern bargain us and put us in with all the other unions.
If the government doesn't pay and recognize nurses for their role, then we won't have a healthcare system in this province anymore.
Debbie was there at the forefront. She stuck to what she was looking for.
We were arguing that we needed a major financial adjustment. We were the lowest paid in the country.
We went till the last minute before we decided and made sure that there was nothing else forthcoming before we asked nurses to take this position.
If you were a nurse at that time, you probably remember the strike. It was 9 days long. We ended up being legislated back with the agreement we had already rejected.
And we still didn't give in. You know, although we were legislated back, Debbie still was the hero.
Chuck Fury, who was another minister in Tobin's government, he said we didn't have the guts to give them what they wanted when they were on the street, and we ended up giving them more. And they did.
1999 gave the Nurses Union and Debbie Ford the credibility, because not only did they talk the talk, but they walked the walk, and they came to be respected and somewhat feared.
One of the things I remember the most about that strike was the night it ended. The House was sitting, the legislation was passed somewhere around midnight. There were hundreds and hundreds of us outside demonstrating. The riot squad, the SWAT team, the RNC, were in a bus on the back parking lot. The black and the helmets and the visors and everything else. And she went over and she banged on the door of the bus. And they opened the doors and she walked up into the bus. And, you know, police officers from one end of it to the other, all in garb, started to cheer. And then Debbie started to sing Solidarity Forever. And they sang Solidarity Forever with her. And, you know, if you were to ask me my fondest memory, boy, that had to be it. It was just incredible. Debbie absolutely finessed the end of the 1999 strike, and knowing when it was time.
Deb is a visionary. You know, to see things ahead of time, you know, used to astound me.
The respect for Debbie Forward shot up exponentially, even by the public of the province, to the point that Brian Tobin's mother told him, don't mess with the nurses. Like, you can't mess with the nurses. And he admitted that after.
Farewell to Brian Tobin, for it's now we're going to leave you. Leave away, we nurses, leave away.
The one thing I remember is the license plates that all the nurses got on their cars.
Mr. Tobin, we will not forget. Yeah, we all wore those license plates with pride.
I think Mom still has that in her house, so it was definitely a big moment in our career.
Debbie Ford plays the long game. The 1999 strike was not about 1999, it was about every year after.
The awakening, if you want. We never looked back.
They came to know that Debbie Ford was willing to pull the trigger.
We ended up with a big raise, but the government was afraid to give us, in the face of the public, they gave us through the back door because they knew Debbie Forward was right and our negotiating team were right.
It's just that advocacy piece that always comes to mind. You look at people who are there for folks like you and I when we're sick, and they're there no matter what, but who's there for them? The union is who is there for them, and Debbie is who is there for them.
Fast forward 10 years later.
We had the almost strike of 2009. So 10 years later, after 99, things are boiling over again in the workplace. Patients are not getting the care that they need.
And now we had a very seasoned union president who had a playbook. The premier of the day probably was less tolerant of defiance, especially in the labour sector.
It was an absolutely fascinating round of negotiations, with a lot of negotiations being done in the media.
Again, there was pattern bargaining. Again, government wanted us to sign on to the dotted line.
The union says it's simple. Recommendation of rejection is based on language issues, not monetary ones.
All we want to do is have a collective agreement that addresses recruitment and retention. If government would drop these two issues, they would have a contract with nurses.
Really, we had one clause that was keeping us apart. And Debbie looked at the clause and she saw something that none of us had seen that was perfect.
It came down to the last very wee hours of the morning.
When my cellular rang, and he says, the Premier says no picket lines. And I said, guys, I got 1,200 people going on the street in 3 hours.
We were ready to go if that agreement didn't happen.
And at 5 a.m., they came to a deal.
And I mean, you can imagine the stress we were both under. And I said, Debbie, unless I'm mistaken, I believe we won. And she stood up and came over. Two of us hung on to each other, and we cried like babies. We were that tired, and they agreed with the wording that Debbie had worked out. and we averted a strike.
I think it was a game of who'll blink first, and we didn't.
Danny Williams went up against Debbie Forward and the registered nurses of Newfoundland and Labrador, and soon became aware that what we were saying is right, that we were understaffed, and that we couldn't go on.
We have been acknowledged and credited as being the only group to stand up to the power of the Williams government, and this in itself is an incredible feat. And it was because of the strength and solidarity of nurses that we were able to achieve.
I think she's motivated by the fact that she knows that things can be really bad for our members. Who's there for them? Well, we're there for them, and I think she takes that very seriously, and she gets up in the morning, and I've never seen her not come in with that moxie of, we need to improve things for our members.
Everyone's important to her. Everyone is special. She likes fighting for people.
Being a visionary, she gave us a direction. And she's taken us so far that I believe that we're one of the more progressive unions out there.
Under Debbie's reign, shall I call it a reign, I could see more connection with the rest of the nursing groups nationally.
I've worked with Debbie for many, many moons, and we've been at meetings locally, provincially, nationally, and internationally. On our national executive board, she's always that person who will remind us, did you think of that nurse working on that unit or in that long-term care facility? Did you think of our members?
She was very innovative in bringing in different things because of the things that she learned when she would be with the other nurses' unions all around the world.
So the Clarity Project was one of the biggest visionary things that Debbie Forward took on for our organisation.
When you went to a place where there were nurses, you didn't know who the nurses were or if there were nurses there at all.
Debbie would say, if they start eliminating us, people aren't even going to know we're gone.
You could go up to anybody and think they're a registered nurse because everybody was dressed alike. There was nothing that made the registered nurse stand out.
If you don't see someone now with the black and white, you know there's no registered nurse there.
It symbolizes the professional piece of what we do, and that's important, to know there's a registered nurse who's coordinating your care.
I mean, she had to sell it, to go out and basically say that, we're going to spend to try to get to this point. But she sold it, and she was right.
Debbie really was a believer in education, and that education was our way to help nurses understand the process, help nurses create the process.
She also has that knack about explaining something very simply so everybody understands.
We have to stop staffing based on the number of beds. You might have 10 patients in the bed that they are all walking up around. One RN could probably look after those 10. Or you could have 10 patients in those beds and you need one-on-one care for every single one of them. Staffing is dependent on the needs of the patient, not on the numbers of beds.
Because your workload is not measured accurately unless you base it on acuity. Debbie went to New Zealand with the Canadian Federation of Nurses Unions representatives to look at their model, which was based on acuity. And she came back and she went to our government at the time and she presented that New Zealand model based on acuity staffing.
The government revised what they were looking for to include the capability of staffing based on acuity. If this comes to fruition, and there's every indication it will, acuity-based staffing, that will be Debbie Forward's legacy, and it's yet to come.
We have certainly grown up. We were very young when Debbie took over, and she's been here more than half the life of the union.
When I think about Debbie's career, her sidekick was always Mary Prideaux. She meant so much to Debbie as her right-hand person here at the Registered Nurses Union.
And Mary was very devoted to the union. Mary spent so many long hours and poured everything into the union, really.
And I think it left a big void for Debbie when Mary passed away.
Hey, there ain't no power like the power of the nurses, and the power of the nurses won't stop.
We had many, many, many great times together. We had many incidents of great hilarity together because Mary and Debbie were always great shoppers and I wasn't. And so there were times when I was stuck with the two of them at some location and ended up at a mall somewhere and then swore I would never do it again.
Yeah, Mom loves to shop.
Oh, what about the winners? She loves clothes.
And beautiful shoes.
Well, my old room at her house now is a second walk-in closet.
And you know something? She's a great hugger.
She loves Christmas.
She loves Mexican food.
Deb loves a joke.
She has a great sense of humor, a great laugh.
And Deb can tell a joke.
She loves Avery.
Avery. Who's the apple of her eye.
Everyone knows that she has a granddaughter named Avery.
Avery, because she is so special to her.
Hi, Mama. I can't wait to play with you when you retire.
Debbie loves to entertain.
She can cook and bake. She loves cooking.
She does make a mean chicken wing.
There's no one can cook a dinner any better.
I love her turkey dinner.
The juice is coming out of it. It's not cooked too much, and it's just beautiful.
We've had a few good dances.
She loves to have a nice conversation over a good glass of wine.
We often start over here. She sees one thing, I see another. And eventually, we move to where she was.
And she sees the humor and stuff.
Really super cool person.
An absolute barrel of fun.
And going to conventions, it's a different perspective on Debbie as a leader.
She knows how to laugh.
She wants that to be fun for her members. She wants to have fun herself.
Debbie is extraordinary, and I love her so much.
I hope she finds something to do with that energy.
I don't know if I'll ever meet anybody in my life again like Debbie. I think she's one of a kind.
You gotta understand, Debbie Forward is a rock star to us.
She has the heart of a lion.
But she connects with people, and they know that she cares.
We will fight together, and we're stronger when we do it together. And that solidarity, when you're standing there with all of your members around you, and we're all, saying that same thing, it is so uplifting and motivating and energizing, and just, that is the power of the collective coming together. And we have to keep fighting for our patients, for ourselves. We have to keep fighting.